What happens when we take animals out of their natural environment? In simple terms, they suffer. When we place animals into captivity, they often experience something called zoochosis. Zoochosis expresses itself as overgrooming, self-mutilation, and pacing. Over time, zoochosis deteriorates the animal's physical and mental health. Contrary to what we may believe, no animal is free from being dependent on the environment that it co-evolved with, at least not without paying a price. As humans, we often forget that we too are animals. And by extension, we are bound by the same dependency on our natural environment. In 2018, approximately 4.8 million Australians suffered from a mental or behavioural condition, an increase from 4 million in 2015. Studies also show that just under half of Australians had one or more chronic conditions in 2018, which is an increase from 2008, where only 2/5 of Australians had one or more chronic conditions. Why are mental and physical health issues so dramatically on the rise? Could it be possible that we too are experiencing our own version of zoochosis? Before you chuff at the idea, allow me to break it down in a little more detail. I'll run through 3 key areas in where modern Western living has hindered or affected our natural state. Make sure you stick around for the last one. It is certainly the most shocking. Up until 12,000 years ago, all humans practiced hunting and gathering. Anthropologists have discovered evidence of hunting and gathering as a way of living in Homo sapiens and our ancestors that date back as early as 2 million years ago. This means for 2 million years, we lived in nature, caught and gathered our own food, and lived in tight-knit communities. It's safe to say that we have evolved to live in such a way. Over time, we have adapted to suit this lifestyle. Nowhere is this more true than with old friends bacteria. Old friends bacteria are the microorganisms and microbiota that accompanied us throughout our mammalian evolution. These bacteria are often found among soil, animals, and outdoor environments. So what happens when we reduce our exposure to old friends bacteria? To put it simply, we experience inflammation and by extension are more prone to chronic disease. To illustrate this point further, allow me to quote from an article in Evolution, Medicine, and Public Health. Quote, "Chronic inflammatory diseases, autoimmunity, allergy, and inflammatory bowel diseases are increasing in prevalence in urban communities in high-income countries. One important factor is reduced exposure to immunoregulation-inducing macro and microorganisms and microbiota that accompany mammalian evolution. Reduced exposure to these organisms predisposes us to poor regulation of inflammation, but inflammation is equally relevant in psychiatric disorders. Inflammatory mediators modulate brain development, cognitive and mood, and accompany low socioeconomic status and some cases of depression in developed countries." In short, when we decrease our exposure to old friends bacteria, which occurs when we aren't in contact with nature, we increase our susceptibility to inflammation, which in turn can lead to chronic physical and mental health problems. To be born into an environment that is divided from nature is to be born into a world where the odds of chronic health disease are likely to be more plentiful. But this isn't the only effect modern living is having on our natural way of being. When we observe some of the remaining hunter-gatherer tribes still existing today in this world, we find something quite incredible. For one, everyone is rarely, if ever, alone. Sadly, this is no longer the case. Studies show that nearly 30% of Australians rarely or never feel a part of a group of friends, and 25% don't feel like they have a lot in common with people around them. Another 21% rarely or never feel close to people and don't feel like they have anyone to talk to. The effects of this aren't insubstantial. Further studies have demonstrated that, and I quote, "Weak social ties have the same negative effects on health as alcoholism and smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Furthermore, chronic loneliness can weaken our ability to look after ourselves. Much like old friends bacteria, other people are our natural physical and mental health regulators. To a degree, we outsource our health. As you are beginning to see, humans are, like animals, interdependent. We require other people and nature to keep us healthy and sane. No one is independent from these elements. When we go against the grain of who we are, we suffer. In this instance, it's no different. We are social animals. We are wired to be social. We now move to the third element, which is the most alarming and the most shocking. So take a deep breath and let's dive in. Over the course of human evolution, we have evolved with bacteria. Some of the bacteria that exist in our GI tract exist nowhere else on Earth. and these bacteria interact with the rest of the body's organs to help them function. So what happens when we start disturbing this delicate bacterial balance that exists exclusively in our GI tract? Well, unfortunately, we are finding out. We have compared the gut microbiome of Westerners with those of the existing hunter-gatherer tribes and have found that they are virtually unrecognizable. With the advent of antibiotics, highly processed foods, and urbanization, we have killed off a large amount of beneficial bacteria. To give you a taste of how this is affecting us, let's look at a particularly beneficial bacteria that is found in all existing hunter-gatherer tribes, but is only found in a small portion of Westerners. Lactobacillus reuteri has a unique capacity to trigger the release of oxytocin in its host. As you may already know, oxytocin is a chemical of empathy and connection. It helps us to see the other side of someone's argument, feel connected, and helps to reduce social anxiety. In addition to this, it may also slow down aging, help us to feel younger, reduce wrinkles, and improve our muscle tone, and overall dramatically improve the quality of our health. And how many Westerners still possess this crucial bacteria in our guts? A sad amount of only 4%. And we haven't even spoken about the abundance of other bacteria that are missing, like treponomes that help us to digest fibers and carbohydrates, or Bifidobacterium infidus that help us to develop as children, or Oxalobacter that help us to digest oxalates in vegetables. Our modern living conditions have stripped our guts of these crucial bacteria. So when we remove old friends bacteria, social connection, and our original gut microbiome, should we really be shocked that we're experiencing a mental health epidemic? I think not. Physical and mental health problems are a symptom of a broken living environment. We ought to start seeing mental illness as something that will inevitably arise when we are absent from what is natural to us. Mental illness doesn't just occur because we are human, it occurs because we act as though we are not. So, what should you do then in order to step back into being human and by extension into what nature intends for you? There are three main things. 1. Start by reading Supergut, found in the description below, in order to restore your natural gut microbiome. 2. Get involved in a community or communities to find meaning and be surrounded by other people. 3. Spend more time in nature with your feet in the dirt. And to learn more about how modern living is affecting our health, check out this video here.